about Persephone? Maybe we have no idea. Um, Last week we talked about the divine feminine archetypes, of which goddesses are one. So, Persephone is a traditional Greek goddess archetype, and she's one of my favorites because she actually is sort of this like two-hearted goddess. She can represent both the the maiden, the vulnerable maiden, the young woman or the inner child side of us, and the queen of the underworld. So the wise, powerful archetype side of us as well. She is that crossover goddess from winter to spring. So the Imbolc season is her ruling season. That's the season we're in right now. And she also represents the entirety of the life cycle because she is reborn every spring. She emerges from the underworld and all of the plants return, the fertility of the earth returns, and in the winter she goes back to take her rightful place as queen of the underworld. So she actually represents the entirety of the cycle. And she's an incredibly powerful goddess in this way. Um, Definitely misunderstood, I would say, and can offer us so much in terms of medicine and in terms of shadows. So that's why I love to dig into her. I am also kind of a recovering Persephone. My younger phases of life, I was definitely a imprisoned Persephone. We'll talk about when she was imprisoned by Hades in the underworld, and I definitely identify with that archetype for some of the younger years of my life. So I'm going to talk about that. And now, though, the goddess that I work with the most, my primary goddess, is Aphrodite now. But Persephone's still, right? She still brings so much to the table for me to work with in my own inner life, and definitely in healing the inner child, the inner patriarch. Um, so I'm really excited to get into that with y'all today. Once you're with me, let me know. And I'm also just curious, as a sort of check in for tonight, if you feel comfortable sharing, you can type it in the chat. And if not, like, I totally get it. You can keep this question close to your heart because it's vulnerable, one of the themes of tonight. So, my check in question for you is to ask yourself, when is the last time that you were taken advantage of? Maybe it was your vulnerability. Maybe it was this maiden part of you that really is wide eyed and bushy tailed and is so hopeful and trusting and really does want to help everyone, and maybe is lacking some definition, some boundaries. So, can you bring to mind a time when this happened recently? My camera's dirty. I apologize, Micah. I might just clean it actually because that's going to bother me. Don't mind me. Yeah. Did that help? That helped a little. Yes. Okay. Once you have it, yeah, I want you to just bring this experience back to your heart. This experience of having a boundary crossed, this experience of maybe giving a little more than you were able to, or yeah, just having someone kind of just plow through that wall of what's okay and what's not okay. Maybe it was a colleague. And we have several moments like this from our lives, don't we? Well, you can rephrase these and reframe these kind of as Persephone moments to call Persephone into. And we're going to talk about how time is spiralic, it's not linear. And so, the good news with any trauma, with any suffering, with any past memories is that we can still go in and work with these. That's one of the great things about working with archetypes, goddesses in particular. Micah says, I think in a past relationship, my lack of boundaries and over willingness to accept blame and self doubt was taken advantage of. Yeah, over willingness to accept blame. Yes, yes. Oh, I feel you on that one, my friend. Absolutely. It's like I would rather the conflict be over. So, like, let's just, I'll take it all, I'll shoulder it all, and we can just end the conflict and be back in our happy, sunshine and rainbows situation. I have been there and definitely still get in that trap from time to time. That's definitely a Persephone piece. Yeah. We're going to talk more about how that connects. Thank you for sharing. Hi, Claire. Welcome. I love this story so much because I think we all have examples of this, especially as women living in the patriarchy, right? And the goddesses are so useful for giving us their own unique brand of how they smash the patriarchy and how they can help us to do so. So there's going to be your primary goddess who kind of shows up for you with all of her medicine and shadows. And then there's going to be other goddesses we can call in to kind of help soften those edges or help empower us with the things that might not come as naturally as well. And tonight we're just going to focus on one of the seven goddesses outlined in Goddesses in Every Woman by Jean Shinoda Bolen, which is Persephone. Yeah. Micah says that's how fawning shows up for me the most, I think. Yes, yes, absolutely. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and the fawn kind of response of the nervous system, of how sort of that social aspect of the nervous system, which is kind of to just be the good girl. Maybe you're not rolling over and playing dead, like literally, but you're definitely kind of melting in the sun of others, maybe, extreme, intense willpower. Yeah, absolutely. I feel you on that one. All right. Good check in. Just a reminder to join us here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I am always open to Donna or an energetic financial exchange for what I give freely here. And something I'm really excited to share with you tonight is that I have a new free webinar coming up on the 30th. So, Tuesday, March 30th. I'm actually going to be doing a webinar on the inner goddesses and all the ways that they help us smash the patriarchy, evolve, deepen into our unique feminine power. And so I've just shared the link in the Facebook group, and Micah and anyone on Instagram, I'll be putting the link in my bio here shortly. Yeah, it's called Unleash Your Inner Goddesses. It's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday the 30th. Just a 1 hour webinar on Zoom. And I'm really excited to present more of what I feel the goddess has really given me in this intuitive download as of recently around the feminine archetypes and all of the ways that they can kind of help sustain us on this path, particularly living in the patriarchy. So, what I'm holding here is part of that download that I feel like I received recently. We talk about divine feminine here all the time. I'm a divine feminine guide, but basically, these are sort of the 8 pieces of the wheel of the year. So we have not only the 4 seasons, right, of spring, summer, autumn and winter, but we have the cross quarter seasons as well, which we talked about with Imbolc. So we are in the Imbolc phase now between winter and spring. So there's all these portals. There's all of these like infinite number of blended seasons of opportunities to really grow a bit more and deepen. And with spiralic time, with the cycle, it's always coming back again. Yeah, and it's the same with the moon. So, of course, it aligns with our 8 moon phases. And I'll post a picture of this later in my stories. But basically, there's also 8 feminine archetypes and 8 goddess archetypes that I've really been working with lately. And this is a blend of course, working with goddesses in every woman, but also working with the archetypes that other teachers have put forth. So it's really a unique blend from a lot of different sources, but also from my own intuition. And I'll just go through them quickly for context tonight. Um, so if we start up at the very, very top of the year, that would be Imbolc. So that season between winter and spring, this would be the waxing crescent moon, and it's the archetype of the witch, actually. And that was the hardest one for me to name, but I finally did name it the witch because one, I realized that witch was missing from my list, and two, this is Persephone. So this is that crossover from death to rebirth. And if that's not a witch, like I don't know what is. It's that ability that we all have to transform our own experiences. Yeah, to become the wounded healer, to take the death parts and transform them into life and into life giving parts for others. Um, and so witch just seemed very fitting. And really quickly going around my little wheel here, we have coming up spring equinox on the 20th. So it won't be long at all. I'll probably do a whole sermon on the spring equinox. And that's, of course, our first quarter moon. And that goddess archetype is the maiden. So you've heard me talk a lot about the maiden already. And it can get confusing, right? Because Persephone is the maiden. She's the ultimate maiden. She's the daughter archetype, that inner good girl on one part, but she's also this queen of the underworld. So that's why we use her as kind of this crossover goddess as well. And several of the goddesses, remember, there's 7 of these traditional, and then there's like an infinite number in other cultures. Um, and several of them show up in the same piece of the pie, or they show up in multiple pieces of the pie. So we can't get too stuck on like, oh, Persephone's the witch, but you know, she can't be anything else, because that's just not true. She's also the maiden. Okay, moving on. After spring, we have Beltane or May Day, which is May 1st, another cross quarter day between spring and summer. So that's another portal, right? And that is the waxing gibbous moon. It's the one that is associated with the archetype of the lover. So I'm really excited. That time of year is all about like finding the mate for the June wedding. That's what my Celtic ancestors were busy doing on May Day. So I definitely think the lover gets associated with that, which would, of course, be Aphrodite as a goddess. And then moving on to summer. Summer, of course, is our full moon phase associated with ovulation, and that would be the mother archetype. So you can think of Mother Mary in Christianity. You can think of lots of other mother archetypes throughout religion, throughout cultures, Mother Earth as well, which we talked about last year, and then Demeter, which is Persephone's mother, who we're going to touch on tonight. And then we have Lammas, which is the cross quarter day between summer and autumn, which is that waning gibbous energy, right? The moon's starting to go down again. And I decided that that was associated with the huntress, the huntress. So real Artemis vibes there. It's kind of like the ship is going down and I am gonna fight everything. And so that can be that real premenstrual kind of energy, very sacred, inner critic energy. Okay, moving on. So then we get to autumn, the true autumn equinox, which is that third quarter moon. And that is associated with the queen archetype. So the queen could be Hera, who's one of the seven traditional goddesses. I'm sure we'll touch on at some point. Along with just anything that is like that sovereign energy that can sometimes really come up at the end of the cycle. Yeah, sovereignty. And then finally, we move into the mystic, which is the the Samhain cross quarter day. So basically, Halloween on the wheel of the year between autumn and winter. Samhain is the traditional name for Halloween. And that's the mystic archetype. So we're getting kind of back into our witchy phase again, very wise woman vibes, but from the perspective of like magical, spiritual, divine, divine goddess vibes. Yeah. And then finally we have sage. So the new moon, like the dead of winter, winter solstice, December 21st, which we most recently had in 2020. Did a whole sermon on winter ritual, rest, winter solstice ritual and rest. That was very sweet. And that's the sage archetype. So that is the ultimate crone, wise woman energy, like elder self. Sometimes I go as far as like deathbed future self. So you can work with many types of your future self, and deathbed future self is like very intense. There can be a lot of grief, and I don't recommend it for everyone. When you're ready for that version and that journey, you will know. But it's basically the wisdom of the dying, what the dying know, what they have to share with us. That was a lot. And 20 minutes flew by fast. Okay, Micah says the phrase wounded healer smacks me right in the face. Yes, my dear, we're going to talk about that more tonight. That is definitely a Persephone archetype, the wounded healer. And that's really where a lot of her wisdom comes forth. So if you have any questions or reflections, drop them in the chat always. I'm going to jump right into the talk if that's okay. And I will say that this week I am releasing a new meditation on my site that's all about the inner maiden. It's actually an inner maiden, inner child journey. And yeah, hopefully that can substitute us doing our meditation here in the sermon tonight because we don't have a lot of time. Okay. So, or if we have time at the end, we'll do a little meditation and embodiment. Let's just take a deep breath and light a candle because we don't want to leave ritual out of this. So if you want to inhale with me, if you want to exhale with me deeply. Well, I just broke that match in half. I'm still going to try to use it. Nope. Sometimes, y'all, it's just not my day for lighting candles. Am I nervous because I know the cameras are on me? Okay, I got it. We're good. Crisis averted. Thank you for being with me. Every moment is a chance to start again and re-ritualize and recenter. All right, my loves. So, we are in the Imbolc times right now. We're in this blended season, these cross quarter days of winter and spring. Maybe where you are in the earth, on the earth, You're already hearing the birds singing outside your window as I am. Maybe you're already seeing the snow begin to thaw. Maybe you're already feeling the sun getting closer and closer and warming your skin with that sweet sun medicine that is so life giving. It feels so good. Today I sat in the sun with Luna while I did some work in the backyard, and I noticed that I kept getting cold, and I just had to look to Luna for the wisdom of what to do because she was moving with the sunlight. The sun was moving so quickly in the afternoon that she would literally just basically like inch her body along with the sun. And I was like, wow, she is so wise. Like, she'll just find her warm patch of dirt and she's so happy in it. And when I, would get really into my work, I would lose track of where the sun was. But all I had to do to be reminded of this wisdom was look to my sweet dog and kind of follow her lead. So that was a really sweet moment. But yes, the sun is getting closer to us and the earth is quickening. The fertility is returning to the earth, which means Persephone must be crossing back over from her time as queen of the underworld to return to the realm of the living and bless us once again. Oh, and did I mention this is story hour? So grab your blanket and your cup of tea. Like, let's just snuggle in together. I'm going to read you some stories. And remember not to take anything too literally here. Working with the archetypes is about symbolism, it's about mystery, it's about kind of taking what resonates with you right now and forgiving and forgetting the rest. All right, beautiful. So, Persephone really represents all of the innocence and freedom of spring, all of that tenderness, that vulnerability, but also the playfulness and the childlike curiosity of spring. And she represents the wisdom and the power of the underworld, the shadow side, the unconscious, our dreams, death itself. In a way, she has conquered death. How many religious stories have this same theme, right? Of dying and being reborn, dying and being reborn. Tale as old as time. Like, this is a story that fascinates us and has fascinated us for as long as we've been around. So I am going to read Persephone's story, and just a bit of a content warning here that her story includes rape and kidnapping, and it is essential to her archetype and to her storyline that I share this. But if that's not going to be good for you to hear, please take care of yourself and do what you need to do for the next couple of minutes, okay? All right. So I also should mention before I read this, I'm reading also from Goddesses in Every Woman by Jean Shinoda Boleyn. Demeter is that mother archetype. She is Persephone's mother. So she will come up again for us around summer solstice. And she's the goddess of grain and like the ultimate nurturer. And she demonstrates both maybe a bit of an overbearing mother who can be a bit controlling or a bit too attached to us, or that fierce, protective, divine spirit of a mother archetype. So, again, remember medicine and shadows in every goddess, in every archetype. Okay? There's good and there's difficult in each of these. Okay, this says Persephone was gathering flowers in a meadow with her companions and was attracted to an astonishingly beautiful narcissus, which is a type of flower. As she reached out to pick it, the ground split open before her. From deep within the earth, Hades emerged in his gold chariot. So, this is the god of the underworld. His gold chariot, pulled by black horses, grabbed her and plunged back through the abyss just as swiftly as he had come. Persephone struggled and screamed for help from Zeus, her father, but no help came. So think of this theme as being abandoned by the patriarchy and being victimized by the patriarchy. Demeter, her mother, heard the echoes of Persephone's cries and rushed to find her. She searched for 9 days and 9 nights for her abducted daughter over the entire land and sea. She did not stop to eat, sleep, or bathe in her frantic search. At dawn on the 10th day, Demeter met, I don't know how to pronounce this goddess's name. Is it Hecate? Does anyone know? Or Hecate? Goddess of the dark moon and the crossroads, who suggested they go together to the god of the sun, Helios. Helios told them Hades kidnapped Persephone and took her to the underworld to be his unwilling bride. Furthermore, he said the abduction and rape of Persephone had been sanctioned by Zeus. So her own father, Zeus, had given Hades the green light to abduct her. All right. Now, Demeter commanded that a temple be built for her. There she installed herself, sat alone with her grief for her abducted daughter, and refused to function. As a consequence, nothing could grow and nothing could be born. Famine threatened to destroy the human race, depriving the Olympian gods and goddesses of their offerings and sacrifices. Finally, Zeus responded. He sent Hermes, the messenger god, to Hades, commanding him to bring Persephone back in order that her mother, on seeing her with her own eyes, would abandon her anger. So see, Demeter, as goddess of grain, controlled the agriculture of the earth, of the land itself. And because she became so upset over the abduction of Persephone, nothing could grow. So only when women use their power to basically make things stop happening for the patriarchy, basically pump the brakes on the whole operation and life cycle, did Zeus respond. So Hermes went to the underworld and found Hades sitting on a couch next to a depressed Persephone. On hearing she was free to go, Persephone rejoiced and jumped with joy to accompany Hermes. But first, Hades gave her some sweet pomegranate seeds, which she ate. So these seeds are very important. Hermes borrowed Hades' chariot to take Persephone home. The horses flew quickly from underworld to upperworld, stopping in front of the temple where Demeter waited. When she saw them, Demeter came running, her arms outstretched to embrace her daughter, who herself ran with equal joy into mother's arms. Then Demeter anxiously inquired whether Persephone had eaten anything in the underworld. If she had not, Persephone would have been completely restored to her. But because she had eaten the pomegranate seeds, she would spend 2/3 of the year with Demeter and the remainder of the year in the underworld with Hades. After mother and daughter were reunited, Demeter restored fertility and growth to the earth. She then provided the Eleusinian mysteries. These were awesome religious ceremonies that initiates were forbidden to reveal. Through the mysteries, people gained a reason to live in joy and die without fearing death. And these mysteries, this was the most widely followed religion for 2,000 years before Christianity. But the temples were destroyed, and all of these mysteries are totally lost because they were so secret. But it definitely had to do with this nature of Persephone, this cyclical nature of the divine feminine, and the idea of death and rebirth. And then the last piece that I will share here is from Persephone's point of view, which just shares that later Persephone became queen of the underworld. So, because she ate the pomegranate seeds, right? Whenever the heroes or heroines of Greek mythology descended to the lower realm, Persephone was there to receive them and be their guide. And it says, none found her absent. There was never a sign on the door saying, gone home to mother, although the Persephone Demeter myth says she did so for 2/3 of the year. So, interesting story. Um, this is one of the most famous goddess myths that we have from the Olympian mythology. And like I said, it was responsible for this wildly important religious order that developed kind of based on it. So I think it's really, really powerful. I'm wondering what your initial reactions are, any questions. Um, I definitely, I'll say Jean Shinoda Bolin goes on to kind of describe that the archetype of Persephone, you know, is both this maiden who is completely taken advantage of, right? She's sort of got her head in the clouds. She's not paying attention. She's super vulnerable and super young and naive. And, you know, she gets kidnapped and dragged to hell. Um, so that's like one piece. And she says that, you know, women who identify with that piece need to set some boundaries. You know, and develop more of, I guess, a backbone, you could say, or define more of who they are. And then she also goes on to say there's the queen of the underworld archetype who takes the suffering from her past and transforms it into medicine for the people. She becomes that wounded healer. So also this talk could have been titled From Victim to Wounded Healer. Because that's also kind of a beautiful archetypal journey that we know when we've taken it. We know when we've taken it. And we're not sort of playing the victim card anymore, which, to be, you know, in all fairness, is a very valid card to play for several people. Okay, so that's a note on goddesses in every woman and how it kind of breaks it down. But this is sort of my take on it. I'm going to take it a step further. And if you're into this, this is a very in-depth deep dive on Persephone, whereas my free webinar on March 30th, Unleash Your Inner Goddess, is going to go through all of the goddesses. So it's going to be interesting. Okay, so starting with the vulnerable maiden side, the challenges and shadows that this archetype offers us is really working with the patriarchy, the inner patriarchy that we've internalized from the air we're breathing, the water we're swimming in every day, and the external patriarchy, sort of the systems and structures that are in place. This is definitely a shadow that Persephone contends with and can teach us how to contend with, because it shows up, right, as body shame, as sisterhood severing, which is really when we mistrust each other, especially as women, when we don't form community, when we stay isolated. We can really look to that as a symptom of the patriarchy. And also when we internalize that inner good girl, like we were talking about with the fawning response, when we try to control ourselves with shame and with, you know, being the perfectionist, that's internalized patriarchy. It's all of these ways by which we take the shame that's put upon us by society and by an expectation and like a gender norm, and we bring it internal. Not our fault, right? We can see how this happens. And I talk about this a lot. We don't have to identify with it and say, oh, I'm so bad because I internalized this system. Like, just a reminder, it isn't your fault. This is this is, like I said, it's the air we're breathing. And awareness is the first step. Don't stop at awareness. Wake up to the fact that you're living in a patriarchy and then stop there. Like, if we do that, patriarchy wins. But we're here to smash the patriarchy. And Persephone definitely does that. I mean, she goes from being sort of this head in the clouds maiden to being queen of the freaking underworld. She becomes sovereign. And there's a lot of takes on this myth. One of them is that she actually chooses knowingly to eat the pomegranate seeds which Hades offers her because she doesn't really want to return to who she was before. In fact, she can't really return to who she was before. It's a real Eve in the Garden of Eden story. You know, sound familiar? Taking the fruit from the devil and uh, the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's She wants to become conscious of all that she's been unconscious of. It has a real sexual theme to it, doesn't it? That awakening of our unconscious sexual power, the awakening of the power of the symbolism in our dreams, the awakening of the power that lied dormant in our bodies. Anything below the line of the awareness we can think of as the underworld here. Okay, so that might look different for all of us. But back to patriarchy. So she also struggles with this challenge of, yeah, being victimized, which is very clear in the story. Another one of her challenges is this mother wound. So if you're familiar with the mother wound, which is Bethany Webster's work, which I absolutely love, she talks about this from a patriarchal standpoint. She says that especially in the mother-daughter continuum, that daughters see their mother's approval and their mother's attention as literally life-giving because at one time it was. And so there can be a special kind of wound, which she calls the mother wound, that develops when we need to choose to either remain in our mother's good graces or evolve and become who we're meant to be. And it can feel like a choice between life or death. And how many women stay stuck in this maiden archetype because they are too afraid to keep moving along this spiral towards that mature feminine, that sovereign feminine mother archetype and beyond, who sets firm boundaries, who tells it like it is, who's not afraid to say who she really is and what she wants and what she needs. Um, so, yeah, I hope this is making sense. A lot of us may have been raised by mothers who were actually perpetually stuck in the maiden phase of their lives. And I think there's a special kind of wound when we are a daughter in that scenario. Yeah. It can be especially hard for us to evolve because maybe we didn't have that modeled for us. This is true of many of my clients. Yeah. Yeah. And so also Persephone's vulnerable maiden archetype, a challenge can be working with the inner child or seeing that the inner child has hidden away, or maybe they've developed some strategies to survive that as they become adults, they're actually inhibiting their growth. So it's the same kind of idea here. Micah says, a reparenting message I've been working with is I give you permission to be different from me. So impactful and radical. I love that, Micah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I'm big into spiritual reparenting, it is so helpful. And we all, to some degree, there's a gap between the parent we have and the parent that we needed. You know, even if in our mind we had wonderful parents, even maybe perfect parents to a degree, and have been really blessed there, there's still maybe a gap in certain memories or situations where, you know, we didn't get the parent that we really needed in that moment. So reparenting, Persephone teaches us a lot about that when she eats the pomegranate seeds, right? And she sets that boundary, and she kind of steps into her own power. And then she lies to her mother, by the way. She's like, no, he forced me to eat them. That's in this book. And Jean Shinoda Bolen says, which he did not. So it's very interesting. Okay, some gifts that the vulnerable maiden archetype gives us. So I don't want you to think of this linearly, like maiden bad, mother good, or maiden bad, queen of the underworld good. You know, it's really, we don't need to do this good bad binary bullshit anymore, right? This is something we got to get rid of. No, thank you. So even the maiden archetype, right, offers so much medicine, so much goodness for us. And some of that medicine comes in the form of playfulness. If you have ever met your inner child and worked with your inner child, like, what was the number one lesson they probably left you with? Can you go out and play with me? Can you pay attention to me? Often it's like baseline, I just need attention and love and safety and nourishment. And when we move up from there, the playfulness is such a theme in working with the inner child, as well as feeling free to be curious, feeling free to ask questions and challenge and question the parent and, you know, the religious authoritative structure, the patriarchy itself, society itself, the rules. All of this questioning, curious energy comes from the maiden, the inner child. And there's also a sense of innocence. And innocence isn't always a bad thing. I was actually just looking at the card in the tarot for the Fool, which is, you know, the zero of the major arcana. It's it's this, like, yes, it's foolish and it's innocent, right? And it's vulnerable. It could be harmed. It could die. It's just starting out on its journey. It's that little baby bird about to fly the nest. But it's also like the beginner's mind, which we talk about in Buddhism and our meditation practice. If you can bring a beginner's mind to something new or to something old, then you're really giving yourself this huge benefit. It's this benefit that maybe I don't know everything, and there's always room for growth, there's always room to learn more, and it's really a positive outlook. So that's also some medicine from the maiden archetype. So, some things that we can do when we're in that sort of maiden phase, if we're feeling vulnerable, if we're, you know, pre-ovulatory or in that waning or waxing, that just starting to wax moon phase, we can be really good about setting boundaries, because this is going to help us. We think about setting boundaries in like the premenstrual phase, but actually in the spring it's still really important because it's new life. We're very tender. Not everything needs to be given away right away. And we also need to stay receptive. So it's that paradox of setting boundaries but staying open. And there's lots of these paradoxes in law of attraction, right? Being specific and having non-attachment. That's just one of the paradoxes. So I want you to think about this tension. Persephone's all about tension. healthy tension that helps us grow, finding our growth edge. So stay receptive, set boundaries, make regular visits to your inner child. Like, I'm talking regular, like monthly at least. Check in. What are they doing? It's a really good sign if they're playing. Not a good sign if they're working. Not a good sign if they're hiding away. You got to ask them what they need and be prepared to give it. And finally, define yourself. Be firm and be clear in who you are. And this can help. Also, opening to the vulnerability. I mean, Brene Brown, the queen of vulnerability, is really the one who taught us, like, it's only through the vulnerability that we find our strength. It's only through these experiences where, yeah, we might get hurt, but we also might get everything, that we find pleasure, that we find gifts, that we grow and evolve. So open to the vulnerability and see it as a form of strength when you're able to be vulnerable with others, and most importantly with yourself. You got to feel it to heal it. We got to soften to heal it. And often that's what the pain and contraction actually wants, is just a little bit of softening. And the pain somehow goes away, doesn't it? All right, let's move on to Queen of the Underworld archetype. So, also lots of challenges and shadows, but also lots of gifts and medicine. So, the challenges and shadows that this one can really bring up for us is being everything to everyone. And there's actually a story, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe in the Odyssey, Aphrodite sends Psyche, who is a human, on a quest. She wants to be like Aphrodite. And her quest takes her to the underworld. And there's all these tasks that Psyche has to do. And I think it's like the very last task. No, she's in the underworld for more than one task. So I don't know which one it is. But Psyche has to travel down into the spiral of the underworld. And there's all types of kind of have-nots, or like, people on the fringes that are grabbing. They're like the miserable people, kind of at the gates of the underworld, and they're grabbing onto Psyche's robes as she walks by. And Aphrodite says, you cannot help them. You have to turn them away. And this was one of the challenges to become a goddess. And, she was able to do it, but it was really challenging. And that's kind of that part of us that, we don't understand why we have to set boundaries. We don't understand why, but we can't be everything to everyone. We do have limits, even in like the peak of the cycle, even in our ovulatory phase, even in that great mothering energy phase. We still can't be everything to everyone. And so I think of this Queen of the Underworld shadow as really, becoming the wounded healer, but still having those firm boundaries, and knowing that part of the reason you're able to sustain yourself as a healer, part of the reason you're able to help so many people, is because you take care of yourself. And you take care of yourself first and foremost. And that's something that I am still on the path to working on. It has been a really hard journey. But as a coach, as a healer, as a therapist, as whatever you are, as a teacher, as a mother, as any kind of giver, like, self-care has to come first. And it's not trivial. And it's not selfish. It's essential. It has inherent worth, intrinsic worth, and it helps sustain you to continue helping our world. So, some gifts and medicine that the Queen of the Underworld archetype offers. Yeah, this from victim to wounded healer idea, right? So, maybe we were a victim. Maybe we were really um, a survivor of something. Maybe we have great suffering in our past, in this lifetime or in past lives, however you make meaning of your experience. We were the victim. And, we can look to Persephone, as I said, to transmute that suffering into medicine for the people, and she had to set the boundary with her mother, of all people, to do it. I know that resonates with a lot of people, specifically in that mother daughter continuum. She had to claim her pleasure to do it, you know? She had to even lie. Oh, that doesn't sit well. But that was her setting a boundary. That was her, maybe cowardly, yes, but that was her deciding, I'm going to spend 1/3 of the year in the underworld, if we take the myth to mean that that was her choice. And she even, it says, she became Hades' willing wife in the end. And some myths say that they grew to have a great love. And so, all of the problems of that aside, socially and in our world, it does kind of show that she went from victim to queen, from vulnerable to sovereign. And the way I work with this as a coach is I tell my clients that they're always planting seeds of worthiness, and they're nurturing those tender little shoots that come up. They have to start before they're ready. They have to take some leaps of faith, and leap and the net will appear. They have to set the boundary even though they don't know if they're going to be rejected. They have to have that sacred no, and not always have that weak, inauthentic yes, until there's just absolutely nothing left to give. And that's how we nurture the worthiness into sovereignty, into getting to the point where we wake up one day and we are queen of our own underworld. We know who we are, we know who we're not, and we've done the shadow work. We have seen the monsters hiding under the bed. We have kind of brought what was below the line of awareness above the line. Okay, I'm going to drone on and on. So, what Queen of the Underworld would have us do is indulge in pleasure, examine our shadows, hold healthy space for others, but with lots of boundaries, and have that sacred no. Say no. It feels so good. You'll start to love it. You'll start to love hearing yourself say it. Only 5 minutes left. Okay. Well, I wanted us to do some journaling, but I'll share the prompts in my stories so you can take your own inner Persephone underworld journey. Okay. The last piece I want to touch on is the cyclical piece, the crossover. She goes to the underworld and she returns, and then she goes back to the underworld and she returns. So, what I said before, time is not linear. This is perpetually happening, as long as the earth is going around the sun, the moon is going around the earth, women's wombs are shedding their layers every month. Our energy is ebbing and flowing. And we might think this is all happening in a straight line, but it's not. It's happening again and again. So we can use goddesses to travel back to those inner child moments and to help embolden us. We can travel back to the times when patriarchy steamrolled us, or someone steamrolled our boundaries, and we can use Persephone energy to set that boundary. And that's actually one of the things that the inner maiden journey I'm going to release here in a couple days is going to touch on and walk you through. Um, so, a note on that. And in terms of, oh, the last thing I wanted to share. So, I've been talking a little bit about women who run with the wolves in the last few sermons, and it is just such a good book. I highly recommend it. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, I believe, is the author. And Persephone really embodies these death, life, death cycles that women who run with the wolves is built upon. She really calls this the wild woman archetype. It's that like wolf woman hybrid archetype. It's the wild nature within us. And it's a nature that embraces our own ability to hold life and death at the same time. So maybe you're a survivor of a near death experience. Maybe you've lost a lot of people to death and you've grieved a lot in your life. Maybe unwillingly you've been sort of initiated into this rite of passage of, witnessing death, being very close to death. And I will say, for those of us who have experienced it, on the other side, there is this deeper wisdom and a deeper intuitive power, and almost like, yeah, like you don't fear death as much. You sort of accept it and work with it on this side of the grave, on this side of the underworld. And that just really reminded me of Persephone. And so I wanted to share a quote from Women Who Run with the Wolves as the end of our story hour. So she says, archetypally, to untangle something requires a descent, the following of a labyrinth down into the underworld, or to the place where matters are revealed in entirely new ways. One must follow what first appears to be a convoluted process, but in effect is a profound pattern for renewal. In fairy tales, to loosen the girdle, undo the knot, untie and untangle means to begin to understand something previously closed off to us, to understand its applications and uses, to become mage-like, a knowing soul. And she says there are three things we need that differentiate living from our souls from living from our egos. And those are an ability to sense and learn new ways. Persephone definitely developed that. Tenacity to ride a rough road. Persephone had to do that. And the patience to learn deep love over time. Persephone absolutely did that. So the last thing I'll read from Women Who Run with the Wolves, she says, a wild patience, as Adrienne Rich puts it, is required in order to untangle the bones, to learn the meaning of Lady Death, to have the tenacity to stay with her. It would be a mistake to think that it takes a muscle-bound hero to accomplish this. It does not. It takes a heart that is willing to die and be born, and die and be born again and again. And I love that quote because she's saying, it wasn't the prince that saved the princess. And it brings tears to my eyes because our whole culture is so obsessed with the maiden, with infantilizing the feminine, right? And devaluing it and keeping it small and powerless. And ultimately, when all of us, when we awaken to our own power, when we taste the pomegranate seed, We taste the fruit from the tree of good and evil, when we make the unconscious conscious, when we embrace the suffering and alchemize it into medicine, we become our own rescuers. You know, we become the hero. And we never needed a prince to save us. And the last thing I'll share, Micah, you actually recommended to me that podcast, The Jungian Life, and I listened to one episode this week, and it happened to be an episode that touched on all of this. They talked about sort of the women's journey and women's rites of passage. And one of the analysts on the show retold the myth of Snow White. And I'll close with this. She says that Snow White was like so sweet. She was like almost too sugary sweet, very naive. She opened the door for anyone, and she did for this witch. And the witch gave her the apple, and she ate the poison apple, right? And she fell asleep until supposedly the prince kissed her and reawakened her. But this retelling of the myth says that the apple was the poison that she had to metabolize. She had to balance that knowledge that she could be harmed or of her own vulnerability in order to truly awaken, in order to rescue herself. And so the retelling of the myth says that it actually wasn't when the prince kissed her that Snow White woke up. It just so happened to coincide with the instant that she metabolized the poison that she needed all along. So, archetypes, fairy tales, myths, stories, they have a lot of meaning for us humans, and they often tell what words, simple prose cannot. So I encourage you now to reflect on these myths that I've shared with you tonight and apply them to your own life. Because there is so much to be uncovered here as it comes to healing internalized patriarchy and smashing the external one. And I hope you will join me on this journey. And it's not just about getting rid of the old ways, it's about building our new ways together in this society that values the divine feminine, and where we all can embrace the inner divine feminine, the inner goddess. All right, I'll leave it there. I will share on my story some prompts to journal on tonight. And in a couple of days, I'll share this maiden journey visualization. So stay tuned. All right, thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. So much love.